Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our March webinar, Best Practices for Mobile Site Checkout. I'm your presenter, Tony Marino, and I'm a usability analyst with Usability Sciences. I've been with Usability Sciences for over 6 years and tested a variety of different products, software, hardware, websites, across a variety of different industries. And one thing that we're seeing today is users are very interested in the mobile website space as well as social media. For today's presentation, we're going to focus on the mobile website, particularly the best practices for a mobile site checkout process for retail websites. I know your time is valuable, so we want to keep the presentation to around 20 minutes. We'll follow the presentation by a Q&A session using the WebEx Q&A feature that you should see there on your screen. You can get a copy of this presentation later, as we'll be sending out a link to it via the email addresses that you provided for us when you signed up for this webinar. So thank you for joining. What I wanted to talk about first was the context of mobile site use, particularly when thinking about the mobile website checkout process. So one of the things that we were able to learn was that users really want a quick and efficient checkout process, especially when they're on their mobile or smartphones, simply because they're on the go and they're typically looking to do something very quickly. Almost 75% of mobile web users expect a complete and simple transaction within a minute or less, perhaps a little bit longer, give or take, depending on exactly what they're doing. But if that overall experience isn't fast or isn't immediate, if page loads are slow, then a lot of times we're seeing a lot of drop-off. This is particularly because there are tons of interruptions when people are using their mobile phones, such as other people coming in to interrupt them, or as we have here, real life, incoming phone calls, and then there are service interruptions. So depending on the level of signal strength they have, if they have a low signal strength and that page load is taking a while, then they'll typically just drop off or wait till they get home to go onto their computers to complete a process. So what we decided to do was to hold an internal study to really see what users wanted to have provided for them when going through a mobile website checkout process. And we learned some very interesting things as well as some best practices that we'll cover later on in this presentation. First thing I wanted to do, however, is just tell you a little bit about how we conducted the study and what we did. So first of all, the objective was to determine the best practices for a mobile site checkout. The particular mobile websites that we focused on were Amazon.com, BestBuy.com, Target.com, and BarnesandNoble.com. Particularly within those four, we wanted to focus on the add to cart and checkout processes to see what users really wanted to have within those particular experiences. We used our own in-house labs, and we asked users to essentially search for a DVD of their choice and then go through the checkout process after adding it to their cart to let us know their thoughts. We tested on 3 phones in particular, some of the most commonly used today: the iPhone 3GS and 4G, the Android platform phones such as the Droid X and the Evo, as well as the BlackBerry Curve. This was an independent study that we conducted in which we had several volunteers come in and assess the different websites and give us their feedback. So what did we learn? Well, before I go into those best practices, I wanted to give you a short video clip just to show you an example of the type of feedback we were able to gather when we conducted this internal study.
Really what I was just looking for were the different versions of Avatar, Blu-ray versus the standard version, and we see a couple of the subtitled versions I guess Best Buy is offering. That first one's not available for shipping, so we can't purchase it right now. So it looks like it's pretty much just the second one we've got as far as an option. Okay.
So, after gathering different feedback, such as the clip you just saw, we were able to come up with a list of some of the best practices that you as a mobile website owner might want to include within your overall add to cart and checkout processes, just to create a better and more optimal experience for your users when visiting their site from their smartphones. So the first thing we learned was that you want to make sure that you allow users to add items to their cart from the search results pages. So while this may seem self-explanatory, one of the things that you first of all want to make sure you have is a search feature. Users who shop for items on their smartphones typically you already had a good idea of exactly what they wanted as they had done research at home and then made a split-second decision that they wanted to go ahead and quickly purchase it just to go ahead and get it out of the way. So when they go to your mobile website, a lot of times they just want to enter in that particular product to receive a list of search results and then add it to their cart. Also, when you allow users to add an item from their cart as opposed to having to click into the product page, then you allow them one less click, which is one less page load, which in turn expedites that experience. So for instance, if we take a look at these screenshots here, you'll see that the first one on the left from Best Buy, this particular user searched for the movie Animal House, and when they received their results, they were able to quickly add that item to their cart and then go into the checkout process from there. Amazon, the screenshot over on the right, however, did not allow users to add the item from the search results when they searched for the movie Blues Brothers, so they were forced to then click into a product and then look for the Add to Cart button. Some users found this very frustrating as they didn't feel they needed to click into the product details to get extra detail because they already knew exactly what they wanted. So again, if you have if you can and you do have a search feature, ensure that the Add to Cart button is provided there on the search results page. You also want to make sure that you provide users with a checkout button at the top of the screen and above the page fold. This placement also helps to expedite the process, as we can see here in this screenshot from the Target mobile site. This user added one item to their cart, so they were able to quickly review the item to make sure that the quantity and the type of item was correct, and then click the checkout button to go into the checkout process. You also want to make sure that you repeat the checkout button at the bottom of the screen. Reason being is that if a user has multiple items within their cart, as they scroll down to check their cart to ensure that the items and the quantities are correct, once they get to the bottom of the screen, they can simply click the checkout button to get into the checkout process, as opposed to having to scroll all the way back up the screen to find the checkout button again. One thing we recommend against is to only include a checkout button at the bottom of the screen, as it will eventually be pushed down as your cart starts to fill up. So if we look at this example from Amazon.com, you'll see that this user had two items added to their cart, and because the checkout button was at the bottom of the screen, users were then forced to scroll down to look for it. This presents a problem for some users, as several users expected the checkout button to be readily apparent on their screen once the cart appeared, and they actually spent a few seconds looking for it before they thought to scroll down. And those few seconds proved to be frustrating for users as they simply wanted to get to the checkout process and begin their transaction. You also want to make sure that you have a guest checkout option for your users, as users typically expect this, especially when it's their first time visiting your website. Don't force them to create an account at the very beginning, as this may hurt your conversion and ultimately have users drop off and not complete the purchase. You also want to make sure that you have an easy and obvious sign-in area for your users who already have an account with your website. So you want to make sure that those username and password fields are placed right there at the top of the page when that initial checkout page appears, so they can easily enter that information if they so choose. So if we look at these two examples here, you'll see that with Best Buy and Target, both of them offer the opportunity for users to sign in at the top of the page with the email address and the password fields. And then Best Buy also does a really great job of providing a checkout as guest option here above the page fold and completely obvious to the user. While Target also has a continue as guest option, they do provide this option below the fold. So we did see some users who initially didn't think that they were able to check out using this particular feature, as they didn't initially see it below the fold. Once they did see it, they were happy that it was there. However, several expressed the desire to see that button above the page fold. Also, you want to make sure that at the end of the checkout process, you provide users the opportunity to create an account if they so choose, since they've already gone through and entered the information necessary to make a purchase. So what we saw was that users who were asked to check out as a guest, or who selected to check out as a guest, once they got to that final screen and they were asked again if they'd like to sign in, several felt more comfortable creating an account at that moment because they had already entered the information, and some of these sites did a great job of providing some bulleted benefits as to why it would be better for them to create an account for the next time when they come to visit the site to have a quicker, more expedited experience. So as long as you provide the option to create an account at the end of the transaction and show them some benefits, a lot of times users will feel much more comfortable doing it than if they're forced to at the beginning. Such as with this example here from Amazon.com. So if you look in the very first screenshot, you'll see that this user was initially asked to enter their email address, and then they selected that they were a new customer. At this point, this user expected to be able to then just go through or check out as a guest. However, when they clicked the sign in button, they were then drawn directly into an account creation process. And we did hear from some users that at this point, if they didn't feel comfortable creating an account, they'd simply abandon the site altogether. So you're losing some conversion there, and you're losing some business there by forcing the users to create an account from the get-go. So instead, as we stated, allow users to check out as a guest and provide this option to create an account at the end of the checkout process with some benefits to make your users more comfortable, especially when they're initially visiting your website and making their initial purchase. You also want to make sure that you let users know where they are within the checkout process via a progress bar. If we look at this first example here, you'll see that Best Buy provides users with a progress bar at the top of the page, and this helps manage the user's expectations by letting them know exactly where they are within the process and giving them a good idea of exactly the type of information that they'll be asked to provide. By lack of communicating this progress, it may ultimately hurt the conversion if users encounter issues during the checkout. This is simply because users are in a hurry, so they want to know exactly what it is you're going to be asking them for. And if they're having issues with the checkout process, or if they're not sure how many steps there are and they're in a hurry, a lot of times they'll decide to simply just forget the checkout altogether, and then maybe try at home later if they remember. But that's still a risky proposition there. So if possible, make sure that you're constantly letting users know where they are by having a progress bar which indicates exactly where they are within the various steps of the checkout process, as well as what they have left to enter. This is a really interesting finding that we came across during our study, is users really liked it when websites provided a field-sensitive keyboard. So what I mean by that is that if users are clicking to an alpha-related field, such as where they should enter their name, then provide them with an alpha keyboard. Or if they're asked to enter in numeric information, such as this example from Target where they're asked to enter their zip code, then provide them with a numeric keypad so they can easily enter their numbers without having to click the shift key. Also, if users are asked to enter their phone number, provide them with a phone number keypad with a keypad which resembles a phone number pad, so that way they can more intuitively enter that number quickly and then move on to the next step. Also, if you're asking users for their email address, perhaps to send them a confirmation after their order has been completed, then ensure that within that alpha keypad that you provide them with a .com and @ key so they can easily enter those pieces of the email address without having to type them in. Lastly, in an address field, begin with a numeric keyboard and then switch to an alpha keyboard after a space has been entered. So for instance, if we look at the Barnes & Noble mobile web experience, you'll see that initially when the user tapped into the address line, they were provided with a numeric keypad to enter in the street number. Once they skipped a space, however, in the second screenshot, then that keypad switched into an alpha keypad so they could enter in the street name. Users found this very convenient and really appreciated that they didn't have to click the shift key or make any changes to their keypad to enter the correct information. You also want to make sure that the default shipping address is the same as a billing or vice versa, depending on which one you ask for first. Ensure that also when you want to ensure that the method for editing the address or entering a new address is also present. For instance, if we look at this example from Best Buy, you'll see that in the first step for the billing address here, that the user entered in their billing information. Once they clicked to the next step, which was shipping and pickup, that billing address was automatically entered by default for the shipping address, However, they were also provided with a very obvious and easy link to change that address in case those two differed. So ensure that you're providing users with as many convenient tools and setups as possible so they can more quickly get through your checkout process, especially when entering billing and shipping information. Also, on the page where you're asking users for their shipping address, ensure that you also provide the shipping options within the same page, so it's saving them a step, it's saving them a click, and saving them a page load. So if we look at these examples here from Target, you'll see that first users are at the top of the page asked for their shipping information, and then after they're asked for their shipping information, as they scroll down the page, they're then provided with the shipping options, so they can select these two related options on the same page and then move on through the checkout process. This helps to consolidate the steps, so it gives you one less step in the process, so it can possibly make your 5-step checkout process into a 4-step checkout process, by simply combining these two areas of information and expediting the overall process for your user. Lastly, you want to make sure that you automatically save the cart contents once a user has added an item to their cart from their mobile phone. If for whatever they happen to leave the website after adding an item to the cart, upon return, ensure that that item is still in their cart through a cookie so they can easily go into the checkout process from there without having to go through and search for that product again. Similarly, if a user is signed in and they add items to the cart on the mobile site, allow them to carry over that full website shopping cart to the HTML site. That way you create fluidity between the mobile experience and the HTML experience. So for instance, let's assume that this user is signed in and they added an item to their cart, and then perhaps they were interrupted and couldn't get through the checkout process. But later they remembered when they were home that they had an item that they wanted to purchase. Well, once they return to the site on the HTML site through their laptop or through their desktop computer, you'll see that the item remained within their cart, so they didn't have to go through and search for it, and they were able to go through and easily complete that checkout process, which creates just a more fluid relationship between the mobile and the HTML. Conversely, if the user adds an item to their cart from the HTML site but does not go through the checkout process, if they sign in on the mobile website, ensure that the item still remains on their mobile website and allows them to go through the checkout process. So those were the main best practices that we were able to gather from our internal study. So let's go through those one more time just to make sure that we're all clear. So for number one, you want to make sure that you allow users to add an item to their cart from the search results page, instead of making them click through to the product page to add it, as users on a mobile phone typically already know what they want, and they really just want to get through and make the purchase and move on with their day. You also want to make sure that you display a checkout button above the page fold at the top of the screen so users can easily review their cart and then get into the checkout process. You also want to make sure that you repeat that checkout button at the bottom of the screen for users who have added multiple items to their cart and want to scroll through the cart to make sure that the correct items and the correct quantity of items are there, and then be able to easily check out without having to scroll back up to the top. You also want to make sure that you provide users with a progress bar at the top of the page during the checkout process so they can easily ascertain how many more steps they have to go, and as well as the type of information they'll be asked to provide. You want to make sure that you also provide users with a guest checkout option, especially if they're new to your site. Several users typically don't want to create an account, they simply want to go through and make a purchase. So if you force them to create an account, a lot of times you'll have users who will drop off simply because they've never gone through your website before, they don't have an account with it, or they simply just don't want to remember another username and password. So make sure that you always provide that option to check out as a guest. You also want to make sure that you make the keyboard field sensitive. So you want to make sure if a user is entering alpha information that you provide an alpha keyboard. If they're entering in numeric information, such as a zip code, you provide a numeric keyboard, or for a phone number, perhaps a phone number keypad. And then for the address, if a user clicks into the address field, begin with a numeric keypad to enter in the street number, and then once they skip a space, change that keypad over to an alpha keypad so they can enter in the street name. You also want to make sure that your shipping address always defaults to your billing address, or vice versa, depending on which one you ask for first in your checkout process. This just makes it more convenient for users, and it also allows them to quickly check the address and then move on. If for whatever reason the shipping address is different from the billing address, make sure that you provide an easy link for users to change that information so they can enter in the correct shipping or billing information and then move on through the process. For number 7, you want to make sure that you include the shipping method on the shipping address page. This just creates one less step in the overall checkout process and also puts related information together, so that way you're expediting that process for your end user and keeping the shipping mindset all in one all-inclusive page. Lastly, you want to make sure that you automatically save the cart contents if a user adds an item to their cart and then for whatever reason leaves your mobile site and returns later. Ensure that item remains in the cart and is constant, as well as if the user is signed in when they add an item to their cart and then they drop off and then visit your HTML website, that the items you entered from your mobile device are still listed there in the HTML cart. So, thanks so much for listening. With that, we'll go ahead and take some questions.